At 2:17 every morning, the steel door on cell 14 slammed shut, even when nobody was near it. Not creaked, not drifted, not moved with the damp wind that crawled through the old concrete corridors of Alcatraz. It slammed, with the force of a furious hand and the finality of a coffin lid. The first night Marcus Bell heard it, he thought another guard was messing with him. The second night, he checked the hinges, the latch, the rusted track, and even the warped frame with a flashlight and a maintenance log in his hand. The third night, he stood 6 feet away from cell 14 at exactly 2:16 a.m., watching the open doorway, listening to the low Atlantic cold groan of the prison settling in the dark. At 2:17, the lock snapped over on its own. No footsteps, no wind gust, no mechanical failure. Just a hard metallic clack that exploded through D-block and made the hairs rise on the back of his neck so fast it felt like invisible fingers had brushed his skin. And then something inside the cell breathed, "Welcome back to the channel." Before this story sinks its hooks into you, tell me where you're watching from tonight. If you love true-feeling horror, haunted places, and stories that leave you staring at your bedroom door at 2 in the morning, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Because Marcus took the night guard job on Alcatraz for quiet money and long, boring shifts. What he got instead was a locked cell, a voice that knew his name, and a truth buried beneath the island that should never have been disturbed. Marcus Bell had never believed in haunted places. He believed in bad wiring, bad plumbing, bad management, and the human tendency to romanticize decay. If an old building moaned in the night, it was wood contracting. If people felt watched, it was because silence made the mind restless. If a famous prison had a reputation for ghosts, that only meant tourists would pay extra for lantern tours and grainy photographs with circles of reflected dust called orbs. That kind of thinking had served him well. At 36, Marcus had spent most of his adult life in security work. Hospitals, warehouses, a museum in Oakland, and briefly a county courthouse that smelled like wet paper and old grudges. He liked routine. He liked systems. He liked logs, radios, timestamps, and the simple dignity of walking an empty building and finding exactly what was supposed to be there. After his divorce, routine had become more than preference. It was survival. He lived alone in a narrow apartment in San Francisco, with blank walls, a coffee maker, a stack of crime novels he never finished, and one framed photograph of his daughter, Lily, from 3 years earlier. She was 11 now, living mostly with her mother in Sacramento, and Marcus saw her every other weekend unless overtime ate the schedule alive. He hated that picture sometimes. In it, Lily was 8, grinning with 2 missing front teeth and holding a paper crown from some school pageant. The photo felt less like memory and more like evidence from a better life. When the contract security company offered him the Alcatraz night assignment, he took it because it paid better than his museum job and came with hazard-adjusted shift bonuses nobody really explained. The island closed to tourists after dark, except for occasional authorized events and research crews. The overnight team was small. 1 supervisor on the mainland, 1 boat operator on standby, and 1 rotating guard on the island itself, unless special work was being done. Most nights, Marcus was alone with a radio, a ring of keys, an aging security cart, and one of the most infamous abandoned prisons in America. It should have been easy money. The prison sat under the night sky like a broken jaw jutting up from black water. Even from the dock, Alcatraz had an unnatural presence after sunset. In daylight it was historical, almost theatrical. Seabirds, guided tours, cameras, school groups, souvenir brochures. At night the island changed character. The whitewashed buildings turned bone pale under moonlight. The empty windows became dark eye sockets. The cell house, with its long internal corridors and stacked rows of bars, seemed less like a structure and more like the shell of something gigantic and dead. Marcus's routine began at 10:30 p.m. when the last staff launch left him at the pier. He would sign the transfer sheet, check the external locks, do a slow pass through the utility areas, the infirmary, the administration wing, and the old shower rooms. After midnight, he would move through the cell house itself, A block, B block, C block, then D block last. The island had security cameras in select areas, but preservation restrictions and budget limitations left wide blind zones, especially in the oldest interior sections. In those places, Marcus still relied on flashlights, ears, and instinct. For the first week, the strangeness was small enough to dismiss. A door he was sure he had latched would stand ajar 20 minutes later. A radio hiss would cut through with a sound almost like speech, then clear before he could make out words. Once, while crossing Broadway, the main corridor, he heard footsteps matching his own from the upper tier, though when he shined his beam up there, the catwalk was empty. He logged everything. That was habit, not fear. Night 3, metallic noise from D block, source not found. Night 4, cold spot outside shower chamber, lasted approximately 40 seconds. Night 6, visual anomaly in cell house corridor, likely seabird shadow through broken upper pane. He almost laughed the first time another employee warned him. The warning came from Elena Ruiz, a daytime preservation tech in her 40s who smoked clove cigarettes at the dock and spoke about the prison the way some people spoke about unstable relatives, annoyed, intimate, cautious. She caught Marcus before departure one evening and asked which block he was assigned to check last. D block, Marcus said. Elena's expression barely changed, but she flicked Dash into the wind and said, "Don't stand too close to 14 if you hear knocking." He smiled. "Are you trying to sell the ghost tour?" "I'm trying to tell you the island keeps habits." "That's not a sentence. It will be later." Then she walked away. Marcus remembered that exchange more than he wanted to. Not because he believed her, but because the island itself had begun to feel like a place with memory. Certain corridors held cold differently. Certain stairwells carried sound in ways that made direction impossible. The old solitary cells in D block were the worst. Even during daytime orientation, they had felt wrong, smaller than their actual dimensions, as if the air inside them had density. Cell 14 was one of the solitary confinement cells, stripped bare except for concrete, steel, and shadow. Its door was heavier than the others, its interior darker. During the official briefing, Marcus had been told a handful of historical legends attached to specific cells had no evidentiary basis and should not be discussed with unauthorized visitors. Cell 14 was on that list. He would have forgotten that too, except for one detail. The first time he passed it alone at night, he smelled seawater and something older beneath it. Not mildew, not rust, something faintly sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a sealed room. He paused, shined his flashlight through the bars, and saw the back wall slick with moisture. When he returned 10 minutes later, the wall was dry. That was the first moment the island stopped feeling merely old. It began to feel observant. The real trouble began on Marcus's 9th night. A coastal fog had rolled in so thick it swallowed the bay, erased the skyline, and pressed against the windows of the ferry launch like damp wool. By midnight, the island felt severed from the world. The radio connection to the mainland still worked, but barely. Static chewed the edges off every sentence. Marcus had finished his first rounds without incident. At 1:52 a.m., he entered D block with a fresh flashlight battery, a clipboard under one arm, and the kind of brittle patience that came from too much silence. D block always altered his sense of time. The corridor there was narrower, darker, and more acoustically strange than the main cell rows. The bars didn't simply reflect sound. They seemed to hold it, turning each footstep into a delayed echo that returned half a beat too late. He checked cell 9. Empty. Cell 10. Empty. Cell 11. Secure. By the time he reached cell 14, he was already uneasy without admitting it to himself. The door was open. He stopped. He had personally checked it at 12:38 a.m. and noted it secure. There were no scheduled entries, no maintenance requests, no authorized personnel on the island besides him. He stared at the black rectangle of the doorway and felt the same instinctive resistance a sane person feels at the mouth of a cave. "Control, this is Bell," he said into the radio. "Possible unsecured cell in D block. Confirm no one entered island perimeter after 2300. Static crackled. Then a garbled answer from mainland dispatch. "Negative on additional personnel." Say again, location? D block, cell 14. The response cut out entirely. Marcus swore under his breath and stepped closer. His flashlight beam slid over the door, the latch mechanism, the frame. No signs of tampering, no fresh tool marks, no broken hardware. He leaned in and aimed the light inside. At first, he saw only concrete floor and the far wall. Then he noticed the writing. Words covered the back wall from knee height to nearly the ceiling, scrawled in wet black strokes that glistened in the beam. Not paint, not marker. The letters looked too thick, too irregular, as though someone had used oil or the tar, or something dragged from deeper inside the building. Come closer. The handwriting was jagged and uneven, some letters huge, others compressed, but unmistakably readable. Underneath, layered over and over until it blurred into a dark patch, were 3 more lines. He is still inside. He is still inside. He is still inside. Marcus's heartbeat kicked hard enough to make his vision pulse. Someone had to be on the island. That explanation was absurdly comforting. He backed up 1 step, pulling a heavier flashlight from his belt and sweeping the beam across the corridor. The ceiling corners, the adjacent cells. Empty, no movement, no sound except distant dripping. "Control, respond," he snapped into the radio. "Possible trespasser. Repeat, possible trespasser inside D block." Only static answered. Then, from inside cell 14 came a low scraping noise. Not from the floor, from the back wall. Marcus turned the beam toward it. The writing shone wetly. Something moved within the darkness at the far end of the cell. Not crossing the beam, not fully visible, but shifting just behind where the light seemed to lose strength. It reminded him of watching a fish swim under black water, sensed more by displacement than shape. "Who's there?" Marcus called. Silence. Then a voice, so faint he almost thought it came through the radio instead of the room. Marcus, every muscle in his body locked. The voice was male, hoarse, and close enough to be intimate. It did not echo like a sound spoken in a concrete cell should have echoed. It landed in his ear as if whispered from inches away. Marcus stepped back again. "Show yourself!" Nothing emerged. The flashlight trembled slightly in his grip. He hated that. He forced himself to approach the threshold. As soon as his boot crossed the line of the doorway, the temperature dropped so sharply his breath smoked in front of him. The beam hit the back wall full on, and the writing was gone. The concrete was blank, stained only with age. Marcus stared, disoriented. He swept the light from floor to ceiling. No messages, no wet marks, no hidden person. The cell was empty. Then the door slammed shut. It happened with explosive violence, missing his shoulder by inches. The steel crashed into the frame, and the old lock assembly snapped over with a metallic punch that rang through the corridor. Marcus stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. For 1 frantic second, he thought he had been locked inside, but he was still in the corridor, staring at the now sealed entrance. His lungs forgot their rhythm. He grabbed the handle. It wouldn't move. He pulled the keyring from his belt so hard the metal bit into his fingers and jammed the proper key into the lock. It turned only halfway, then stuck. He tried again, cursing, shoulder pressed to the cold bars. The mechanism resisted, then abruptly gave. The door creaked open. The cell was empty, completely, undeniably empty. Marcus backed out and almost tripped over something on the floor behind him. It was a shoe, a single black leather dress shoe. Old-fashioned, its surface glossy with damp. He knew with sick certainty it had not been there 30 seconds earlier. The leather was cracked along the toe, and clinging inside the heel cup was a smear of something dark and reddish-brown. He crouched despite every instinct telling him not to. The inside of the shoe held part of a human foot. Not a fresh one, not bone, not cleanly severed. It was a collapsed, leathery remnant. Gray skin clinging to shriveled tissue, as if preserved by cold and salt. The ankle ended in a ragged dark edge that looked less cut than torn away. Marcus lurched upright and stumbled 2 full steps before he could breathe again. His radio burst into life with such sudden volume he nearly shouted. "Bell? Bell, you copy?" It was dispatch, distant but clearer now. "We lost you. Repeat last." Marcus looked from the shoe to the open cell to the corridor beyond. All of it wrong. All of it impossible. He keyed the mic with stiff fingers. I've got evidence of unauthorized access, he said, hating how unsteady his voice sounded. Need supervisor and possibly park police on next launch. Unauthorized access to what? Marcus swallowed. D block, cell 14. There was a pause. Copy. Earliest launch in 35 minutes. He looked again at the shoe. Something wet tapped the floor behind him. He turned. A line of water was seeping from under the back wall of cell 14. Thin at first, then spreading across the concrete in a dark, reflective ribbon. It did not behave like normal runoff. It crept with direction, branching around the uneven floor as if choosing its path. Toward him, Marcus retreated until his back met the opposite bars. The water reached the threshold, stopped, and from its black surface a single bubble rose and burst with a tiny sound like a lip smacking open. Then the whisper came again. He drowned trying to leave. Marcus ran. He hated himself for it later, but he ran. He cleared D block in seconds, boots hammering the corridor, flashlight beam jerking wildly over stone and bars. He did not stop until he reached the broader central passage near the administration office, where lights from the mounted emergency strips felt marginally more human. There he bent over, palms on his knees, dragging air into lungs that seemed too small for his body. When he called the mainland again, he did not mention the voice. He mentioned the shoe, the self-closing door, the water leak. He left out the fact that when he looked down at his own boots, the soles were wet with seawater from a cell that had no open plumbing. Supervisor Nolan arrived 42 minutes later with a uniformed ranger and a medical response kit no one ended up needing. They found Marcus pale, shaken, and waiting outside D block with every overhead light in the area switched on. Cell 14 stood open. There was no shoe, no water, no writing, nothing. Nolan, a practical man with a neck like a bull and a permanent squint of irritation, listened to Marcus's report in complete silence. Then he inspected the door himself, tested the lock, examined the floor, and glanced at the empty cell with visible impatience. "You had a stress event," Nolan said at last. Marcus stared at him. "I know what I saw." "Did you touch the shoe?" "No." "So we have no physical evidence." "There was a piece of a foot in it." The ranger shifted uncomfortably. Nolan rubbed one hand over his mouth. "You've been on night's 9 shifts, alone, on an island with a reputation, fog, bad radio, low sleep, people see things." Marcus almost swung at him. Instead, he said, "Then why was the cell open?" Nolan had no answer for that. Or rather, he had too many weak ones. Old lock, faulty alignment, incomplete check. He took photos anyway, logged the incident, and assigned a maintenance inspection for the next day. Before leaving, he pulled Marcus aside. "You're not the first guard to have trouble in D block," he said quietly. "That doesn't mean there's anything supernatural happening." "Then what does it mean?" "It means some places are bad for the mind." Nolan went back to the launch with the ranger before dawn. Marcus remained on the island until shift end because protocol required coverage and because pride refused to let him ask for extraction. At 5:11 a.m., as gray light seeped into the sky, he went back to D block alone. Cell 14 was shut and still. On the concrete just outside the threshold, barely visible unless the light hit it at an angle, was a wet footprint. Not a boot print, a bare human footprint, narrow and long, as if made by someone who had stepped out of deep water. It pointed not away from the cell, but toward it. Marcus should have quit after that. He thought about it all day, lying awake in his apartment while traffic hissed below the window. He thought about calling Nolan, fabricating a family emergency, and never setting foot on the island again. But by afternoon, the certainty of what he had seen had already begun to erode under daylight logic. That embarrassed him more than the fear itself. He replayed details and found them unstable. Had the writing truly covered the wall? Had the voice said he drowned trying to leave, or they drowned trying to leave? Had the shoe appeared behind him, or had he simply failed to notice it before? This was how a place like Alcatraz got inside people, he told himself. Not with ghosts, but with suggestion. So he returned the next night, determined to prove it was all mechanical, environmental, psychological. By 11:40 p.m., he had mounted a small battery camera in the D-block corridor facing cell 14. He requested it as an incident verification measure, and Nolan approved with obvious annoyance. Marcus also carried a digital thermometer, a body cam, and a second radio. If the cell acted up again, he wanted proof. The night passed quietly until 2:11 a.m. That was when the first knocking started. 3 slow knocks from inside cell 14. Marcus froze halfway down the corridor. The camera's tiny red indicator glowed steadily above him. The cell door was open by 12 inches, exactly where he had left it after his inspection. No draft touched his face. The air felt thick, pressurized, like the moments before a storm. Knock, knock, knock. Each rap came from within the darkness, not from the metal door itself, but deeper in the cell, as though someone were tapping the interior wall with a knuckle. Elena's warning flashed through his mind. Don't stand too close to 14 if you hear knocking. He told himself not to be ridiculous and stepped forward anyway. The temperature on the digital reader dropped from 52 to 41 degrees in 4 seconds. Control bell, he said softly. Documenting repeated noise event at cell 14, camera running. No response, just static. The knocking stopped. Marcus reached the threshold and raised his flashlight. A man was sitting on the floor at the back of the cell. Marcus jerked so hard he almost dropped both light and radio. The figure sat with knees drawn up and arms wrapped around them, head bowed. He wore a dark uniform or coat, impossible to see clearly in the weak beam. Wet hair hung over his face. Water pooled beneath him, spreading across the concrete in a black sheen. "Do not move," Marcus said reflexively, security training overriding terror. "Identify yourself." The man lifted his head. His face was not mutilated, not monstrous, not rotting. It was worse for being nearly normal. Pale skin, hollow cheeks, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the flashlight instead of reflecting it. Water streamed from his nose and mouth in delicate rivulets. His lips parted, and a soft gush of seawater spilled down his chin. Then he smiled with unbearable sadness and said, "You're late again." Marcus stumbled backward out of the doorway. The cell slammed shut at 2:17 a.m. The lock snapped over. The corridor lights died. Total darkness swallowed D-block. Marcus heard his own breath, the hiss of the dead radio, and then movement, slow, deliberate movement, from inside cell 14. Something dragged across concrete. A palm pressed against the other side of the barred slot in the door with a wet slap. The body cam's tiny screen was dead. The thermometer had shut off. Only his flashlight remained, and when he hit it against his palm to steady the beam, the light revealed bars shining with moisture that had not been there a second earlier. A face appeared between the bars. Not the seated man's face. Another one. This one had skin stretched too tightly over its bones, lips peeled back, one eye clouded white with decay. The mouth opened wider than it should have been able to open. Water poured out and hit the floor in a continuous stream. Then more faces crowded behind it, shifting in the dark like bodies packed against a hatch. Marcus ran his hand blindly along the corridor wall until he found the emergency breaker switch. He hit it. Lights flickered back on. The door to cell 14 stood open. The cell was empty. He stood there trembling so hard he had to brace one hand on the bars of the opposite wall. When he finally remembered the camera, he looked up. The red recording light was off. The battery compartment hung open. Inside, the batteries were gone. He searched the corridor on hands and knees, then checked his pockets in a panic as though he might somehow have taken them himself. Nothing. The batteries had vanished. Later, when he reviewed his body cam footage in the administration office, the file for that time block was corrupted. The video showed D-block normally until 2:16:58 a.m., when the image tore into digital static. The audio survived for 8 seconds. 8 seconds of Marcus whispering, "Who are you?" Then a man's voice, close and clear, answering, "Number 14." After that came a sound like many people inhaling at once. Marcus did not tell Nolan everything the next morning. He knew how it sounded. He reported equipment interference and visual disturbance. Nolan, exhausted and skeptical, reassigned another guard to accompany Marcus on the following shift. That guard lasted less than an hour in D Block. His name was Aaron Pike, a college kid working seasonal security who carried bravado like cheap cologne. He joked about prison ghosts all evening, called Cell 14 the VIP suite, and tapped the bars with his flashlight until Marcus told him to stop. At 1:58 a.m., they were standing 20 feet from the cell when Aaron went suddenly quiet. "What?" Marcus asked. Aaron lifted one hand slowly and pointed toward the upper catwalk. There, leaning over the rail, was a little girl. She wore a pale dress that might once have been white. Her dark hair hung in wet strings over her shoulders. One hand rested on the rusted railing. The other was tucked behind her back. She looked no older than 9. Marcus's chest clenched. "Hey!" he shouted. "Stay where you are!" The girl turned her head toward them with unnatural slowness. Where her eyes should have been were only dark hollows brimming with black water. Aaron screamed. Not a startled yell. A full, stripped raw scream of total panic. He bolted down the corridor, slamming shoulder first into the wall in his haste, then kept running. Marcus called after him, but Aaron didn't stop. By the time Marcus looked back up, the catwalk was empty. Aaron refused to return to the island after that and quit 2 days later without notice. Marcus might have followed if not for Lily. On his next custody weekend, his daughter sat in his apartment eating takeout noodles and complaining about algebra while Marcus tried to pretend he wasn't distracted. She noticed anyway. Children always did. "You look gross," Lily said, squinting at him over her chopsticks. "Thanks. You're not sleeping." "I'm sleeping." "You have scary eyes." He almost laughed. "That's very comforting." She shrugged. "Mom gets scary eyes when she lies too." For a moment, the room felt normal again. Warm, safe, human. Then Lily frowned and tilted her head. "Who's that?" she asked. Marcus turned. The hallway to his bedroom was empty. "What do you mean?" "That man," she pointed directly past him. "By your room." His blood turned to ice. The hallway remained empty, but the air there was several degrees colder than the kitchen. Marcus stood up so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. Lily's face changed at once from curiosity to alarm. "There's no one there," he said. She lowered her hand slowly. "Oh." Then, after a pause, "Then why is the floor wet?" Marcus looked down. A trail of damp footprints led from the apartment door to the dark hallway. Bare footprints, adult-sized. Every print pointed toward Lily's bedroom bag on the couch. He packed her things and drove her back to Sacramento that night under the excuse of an early school event. He did not tell his ex-wife why. He barely trusted himself with the answer. The island was following him. That realization broke something open inside him. Not fear, exactly, but a desperate need to understand. He returned to Alcatraz on his next shift early and began digging into old maintenance archives and incident logs stored in the administrative building. Most were mundane. Corrosion reports, broken fixtures, vandalism, bird infestation, visitor complaints. But scattered through decades of paperwork, he found odd entries that had been quietly minimized or buried. 1962, temporary closure of D Block for plumbing anomaly. Water intrusion without source. 1978, preservation volunteer reported hearing male crying from sealed solitary cell after hours. 1989, electrical contractor refused to re-enter lower corridor after encounter with occupant. 1997, unauthorized chalk writing appeared inside cell 14 reading "Stay out of the tide." Then Marcus found a folder misfiled under structural studies. Inside were photocopies of older documents from the prison's active years. One was an incident report dated October 1943 concerning an inmate transferred into D Block isolation after a violent altercation. The prisoner's name, Elias Voss. The report was incomplete, several lines blacked out in heavy marker, but one paragraph remained readable. Inmate Voss continues claiming another prisoner occupies his cell during lights out. Subject describes the wet one. Emerging through wall seam after 0 to 10 hours. Repeated insistence that cell door lock itself without staff action. Subject found on October 14th in severe distress with fingernails broken against interior concrete. Another page, likely from a disciplinary ledger, noted that Voss died 3 days later under disputed circumstances. Official cause: self-inflicted trauma during psychotic episode. Unofficial notation in pencil at the bottom: body recovered with lungs containing salt water. Marcus stared at that line until the letters blurred. He dug deeper. There were references to an earlier event in 1937 involving a failed escape attempt during heavy fog. 3 inmates and 1 correctional officer disappeared near the old utility tunnels beneath the cell house. No bodies officially recovered. Case unresolved. One witness statement, largely illegible, included the phrase heard them banging from under the floor. That phrase led Marcus to Elena. He found her cataloging rusted fixtures in a side building the next afternoon. She took one look at his face and said, "So it finally noticed you." Marcus didn't waste energy denying anything. He showed her the copied documents. She read them in silence, then handed them back. "There are older stories," she said, "before the prison shut down. Men hearing locked doors at the same time every night, water appearing in dry cells, a guard who opened 14 and found it full of seawater to the ceiling." "That's impossible." "So is a mummified foot in a shoe." Marcus swallowed hard. "You believe me?" Elena gave him a long, measuring look. "I believe places can hold violence the way cloth holds smoke." "That's not an explanation." "No, but explanations are for things that want to be understood." She led him to a restricted maintenance map of the island. Beneath the main cell house ran older service corridors, drainage shafts, and sealed utility channels from multiple renovation eras. One narrow passage passed directly under D Block. "Officially inaccessible," Elena said. Unofficially, an engineer opened part of it in 2003. They found standing water, old debris, and a collapsed section near 14. Work stopped after one of the crew disappeared for 6 hours and was discovered in the shower room with hypothermia and no memory of leaving the tunnel. Marcus looked at the map, then at her. "You've known all this?" "I've worked here 15 years. The island tells the same story in different ways." "And you still come back." Elena's smile was thin and tired. "It doesn't bother everyone equally." That night, Marcus did not wait for 217. At 12:45 a.m., he took the maintenance map, a stronger flashlight, bolt cutters, and a portable camera into the lower service corridor accessed through a locked hatch behind the laundry area. The tunnel beneath the cell house smelled of salt, concrete dust, and stagnant water. The ceiling was low enough that he had to duck in places. Thick pipes ran overhead, all dry and cold. His boots splashed through shallow puddles that reflected the beam like black mirrors. The deeper he went, the stranger the tunnel became. Sounds from above filtered through the stone in warped fragments, metal clanks, distant footfalls, once something like low murmuring. The map's markings no longer matched the passage precisely. He found side cuts that should not exist, dead ends where open channel was indicated, and one section where the walls narrowed so abruptly it seemed the stone had swollen inward. At 1:33 a.m. he reached the point beneath D Block. There he found a rusted maintenance door, half swallowed by mineral deposits. The number 14 had been scratched into it repeatedly, dozens of times, until the metal around the digits was gouged white. Marcus set down the camera, wiped his palms on his uniform pants, and pulled the door. It opened inward with a sucking sound. The space beyond was not on the map. It looked like a natural cavity widened by human tools long ago and then abandoned. The rock walls sweated brine. The floor sloped into darkness filled with ankle-deep water. At the center of the chamber stood a vertical shaft capped with old bars, like a drain or vent reaching upward. From somewhere above it came a faint metallic noise, a lock engaging. Marcus looked at his watch. 2:17 a.m. The bars over the shaft began to rattle. Water beneath his boots vibrated with concentric ripples, moving toward the shaft from all directions. Then a hand rose from the black water inside it and wrapped around one of the bars. Pale fingers, long nails, skin swollen and peeling. Another hand joined it. Then a face lifted slowly between them, emerging inch by inch from the darkness below. A man's face, waterlogged and wide-eyed, mouth split in a grin too wide for a living jaw. It spoke in a chorus of overlapping voices. "Open the cell." Marcus staggered backward. The flashlight beam shook wildly over the chamber walls, revealing more shapes moving in the water below the grate. Multiple bodies circling, bumping the underside of the shaft like trapped things in a well. "Open the cell," they repeated. Then, softly, in Lily's voice, "Dad?" Marcus ran for the tunnel entrance as the chamber filled behind him with the sound of wet hands slapping stone. He burst back into the service corridor, slipped, slammed shoulder first into the wall, and heard pursuit. Not footsteps, but the heavy drag of water moving where no current should exist. He didn't look back. He reached the laundry hatch, climbed through, and bolted it just as something hit the other side with enough force to bow the metal outward. The impact left a handprint, not made of mud or rust. A wet handprint that slowly turned pinkish, then dark red, then brown, like drying blood diluted by seawater. Marcus spent the next hour in the administration office with every light on. The map spread across the desk, his service pistol locked uselessly in a safe because firearms were restricted in most preservation areas. He should have called Nolan. He should have requested emergency evacuation. Instead, he listened to the building. At 2:41 a.m., a knock sounded from the office door. 3 slow raps. He did not answer. A minute later, the office telephone rang. There was no caller ID, no external line active overnight except emergency dispatch. Marcus let it ring 4 times before picking up. At first, he heard only water moving over stone. Then a man said, with exhausted patience, "You opened the wrong side." Click. When dawn finally came, Marcus no longer felt like a guard on a strange assignment. He felt selected. Marcus made one decision before the next night began. He would not bring anyone else into it. That was not courage, it was guilt. Whatever lived around cell 14 had crossed into his apartment, had used Lily's voice, had begun speaking to him as though it knew his routines, his weak points, his memories. He could tell Nolan and the Rangers, but what would he say? That drowned things rose beneath the prison and wanted him to open a door. At best, he would be removed from duty and written off as unstable. At worst, somebody else would take his place and become the next name on the island's private list of those it had chosen. So Marcus prepared alone. He borrowed old schematics from Elena. He reread the prison documents until a theory emerged from the fragments. In 1937, during heavy fog, a small group, 3 inmates and 1 correctional officer, attempted escape through a service route connected to drainage structures under the cell house. The route collapsed or flooded. Officially, they vanished into the bay. Unofficially, something happened beneath the prison, somewhere between the shaft below D block and the solitary cells above. Years later, inmate Elias Voss, locked in cell 14, began reporting the wet one entering through the wall seam. Then he died with salt water in his lungs. Maybe cell 14 was not merely haunted. Maybe it was an opening, a mouth. At 1:30 a.m., Marcus entered D block carrying a pry bar, industrial chain, a portable floodlight, his body cam, and a canvas bag containing old keys Elena had found in storage. She had tried to stop him from going alone. He had thanked her, lied to her, and waited until she left the island on the last evening boat. The prison felt aware of his intent. From the moment he stepped into the cell house, noises followed in impossible sequence, bars rattling 2 rows away, whispers above him, a distant cough from an empty tier. The air smelled powerfully of brine. Water dripped where no pipes ran. By the time he reached D block, his uniform collar was damp as if from sea mist. Cell 14 stood open. Inside, a line had appeared on the back wall, a hairline crack running vertically from floor to ceiling. Water seeped from it in steady threads. Marcus set the floodlight in the corridor and aimed it into the cell. The beam flattened the shadows but did not fully erase them. The back corners remained dimmer than they should have been, as though light itself thinned inside the room. He looped the industrial chain through the exterior handle and around the opposite bars, fixing the door in the open position. Then he tested it twice. Solid. The lock could not engage unless the chain snapped or the bars gave. His watch read 2:11 a.m. From the crack in the wall came a sound like breathing through a wet cloth. Marcus took one step into the cell and forced himself not to retreat. "Who are you?" he said to the room. "What do you want?" At first there was only dripping. Then the crack widened with a sharp report, splitting outward by an inch. Black water spilled through and spread across the floor around his boots. The temperature dropped so violently his teeth clicked together. A figure pushed through the crack. Not physically. Not in the normal sense. It emerged as though the wall were water and the body beyond it had simply leaned forward. First the head, then shoulders, then the rest. A man in a correctional officer's uniform from another era, fabric hanging in soaked folds from a body bloated in some places and shriveled in others. One sleeve was torn away, exposing an arm with skin sloughing from the forearm in pale ribbons. His face was puffy with submersion, but human features remained visible beneath the ruin. Marcus recognized him from an archival photo. Officer Daniel Reeve. Missing, 1937. Reeve stood in the center of cell 14, water pooling around his boots, and fixed Marcus with eyes filmed over like drowned pearls. "We were not alone down there," Reeve said. His voice came from his mouth and from the crack simultaneously. Marcus's throat tightened. "What happened?" Reeve's jaw worked as if chewing on cold. "The men thought the tunnel led out. Fog above, tide below. One of them had stolen keys. One of them heard knocking under the floor for weeks and said something wanted release. They opened the lower gate." As he spoke, shapes moved inside the crack behind him, pressing outward like bodies visible through deep water. "We found a chamber where seawater should not have reached. There was a door under the island, iron bars over a shaft. Something was in it, something that had the voices of drowning men. It promised a way through." Marcus felt his pulse hammering in his temples. "You opened it." Reeve's waterlogged face crumpled with grief. "One inmate did. I tried to stop him. The tide came in black." The figures inside the crack surged closer. "It took him first, then the others. It did not kill cleanly. It learned." A wet hand slapped the inside of the widening seam. Then another. More voices whispered in overlapping fragments, pleading, laughing, sobbing. Marcus looked at the chain on the door, suddenly terrified it wasn't enough. "What is it?" he asked. Reeve's gaze shifted to the corridor beyond Marcus, as if seeing something approach. A place where dying stacked too deep. Water, stone, fear, and men left to vanish. Call it a hunger if you need a word. The cell lights exploded overhead. Glass showered the floor. The floodlights sputtered but remained on, now strobing faintly. In its trembling beam, the crack split wider still, opening into a vertical black wound in the wall. The smell that poured from it nearly drove Marcus to his knees. Salt rot, old blood, drowned fabric, and something sweetly corrupt beneath it all. Hands began reaching through. Not one or two, dozens. Hands in fragments of uniforms. Hands with missing fingers. Hands swollen pale and glistening. Hands reduced almost to bone. They clawed at the concrete, the air, Marcus's pant leg. He swung the pry bar instinctively and shattered one wrist. It bent backward with no resistance and kept grasping. The chained cell door jerked inward. Metal screamed against metal. Something huge had taken hold from the other side. Marcus lunged for the chain as the entire door shuddered. The bars across from it rattled in sympathy. Behind him, the voices in the crack rose into a collective moan so deep it seemed to vibrate through the floor. Then one voice separated from the rest. "Lily's. Dad, please." Marcus went rigid. The crack darkened. A small figure stepped from it barefoot, water dripping from the hem of a pale dress. Dark hair clung to a child's cheeks. When the face lifted, it was Lily's face. His daughter's exact eyes, mouth, frightened expression. She held out one hand. "It's cold." Everything in Marcus rebelled against reason. His body leaned toward her before his mind caught up. His throat closed on her name. Then he saw the feet. The toes were wrong. Too long, too many joints, flexing against the concrete like pale insects under skin. The child smiled. Her mouth split open to the ears. Marcus swung the pry bar with both hands. It connected with the side of the thing's head, bone cracked like soaked wood. The body burst apart into a collapse of black water and writhing strips of fabric that slithered back toward the crack. The chain door buckled inward another inch. Through the bars, Marcus glimpsed movement in the corridor. Figures gathering shoulder to shoulder outside the cell. Men in inmate denim. Men in old guard uniforms. Barefoot women who had never belonged in the prison at all. The little girl from the catwalk. Faces from the dark shaft below. Every one of them dripping. Everyone staring inward with patient hunger. "We are still inside," they whispered. The wall behind Reeve ruptured completely. The crack became an opening large enough to swallow a man. Water poured through in a heavy rush, filling the cell ankle-deep in seconds. Within it, forms rolled and collided like bodies caught in undertow. Reeve turned toward the breach, and Marcus saw what lay beyond for a single impossible instant. Not a tunnel, not a room, but a descending dark, packed with drowning figures stacked layer upon layer, opening mouths full of seawater, falling without ever reaching bottom. At the center of that depth, something moved, not human, not once human, a shape made of many bodies joined by current and darkness, its outline never fixed, its face forming and unforming from skull-like masks of water and skin. When it leaned nearer, Marcus heard every voice the island had used. The crying prisoner, the little girl, Aaron's scream, Lily, his own voice whispering from somewhere behind him. The chain snapped. The cell door slammed halfway shut before lodging against Marcus's shoulder. Pain shot down his arm. He shoved back with all his weight, boots skidding in rising water. The corridor figures surged forward, hands gripping the bars, reaching through the narrowing gap. Reeve seized Marcus by the front of his uniform. The drowned officer's grip was iron cold. "Listen," Reeve said, forcing the words through a mouth spilling black water. "It needs the lock. It feeds on closure, on being sealed. Keep the cell open and it remains divided. Shut it and it rises." Marcus understood in one blinding flash. Every event, every 217 slam, every plea to open the cell. The thing below needed the ritual of locking and opening, the repetition, the surrender. Cell 14 was the lid. The island had been using Marcus to complete something. "How do I stop it?" he shouted. Reeve looked toward the breach where the composite shape drew nearer. "Break the mechanism! Break the habit!" The corridor entities hit the door all at once. The impact knocked Marcus sideways into the water. Icy brine flooded his boots and soaked his sleeves. Hands grabbed at him from the cell threshold, slick and crushing. He kicked free and crawled toward the door frame where the lock assembly sat bolted into old steel. The pry bar. He found it floating against the wall and jammed its tip into the lock housing. The mechanism was corroded but thick. He threw his weight down once. Metal shrieked. Again. A bolt sheared loose. Behind him, the creature in the breach gathered itself. Water rose to Marcus's knees, though no source in the room could account for that volume. Reeve turned and walked toward it, like a man returning to an unfinished duty. The drowned officer glanced back one last time. There was no heroism in his ruined face, only weariness. "Hurry!" The thing struck him first. A mass of hands and faces engulfed Reeve and dragged him into the opening. His scream came out as dozens of screams layered together. Marcus drove the pry bar into the lock assembly with every ounce of strength left in him. The plate buckled. Springs burst outward. The latch twisted at an angle. The cell door convulsed. The corridor figures shrieked, not in anger, in fear. Marcus ripped one of Elena's old keys from the canvas bag and jammed it into the warped mechanism. It snapped off inside. He hammered the pry bar again. The entire lockbox tore free from the door in a spray of rust and screws. At once the bars of cell 14 began to vibrate. A low rising sound filled D-block, deeper than any mechanical alarm. A subsonic moan that pressed against Marcus's organs. The water in the cell reversed direction, rushing back toward the breach in violent streams. Hands clawing from the opening lost coherence, melting into churn and foam. The figures in the corridor stumbled backward as though dragged by invisible hooks. The creature in the wall turned what might have been its head toward Marcus. For the first time, it showed rage. Every face within it opened its mouth. From all of them came Lily's voice, crying, "Don't leave me here." Marcus nearly broke. Then he remembered the footprints in his apartment leading toward her bag. Not to Lily, but toward what the thing wanted from her. He grabbed the detached lockbox with both hands, staggered to the center of the cell, and hurled it into the breach. The mass inside surged forward to swallow it. Marcus yanked the floodlight cable from the corridor socket and threw the sparking end into the water. White-blue electricity exploded through the flooded cell. The shock hurled Marcus backward into the corridor. Light filled his skull. The world became soundless and blinding. In the breach, the many-bodied thing convulsed, its human fragments flashing into stark visibility. Guards, inmates, children, shapes too incomplete to name, before collapsing inward with a pressure implosion that sucked the water off the floor and slammed the ruined edges of the wall together. Then everything went dark. Not total darkness, just the dim emergency strips returning one by one. Marcus lay on the corridor floor, tasting blood. His ears rang. Smoke curled from the ruined floodlight. The chain hung broken. Cell 14 stood open, its door warped and lock assembly destroyed. Inside, the back wall was solid concrete again. Only one thing remained on the floor: Officer Reeves' badge. Marcus dragged himself to his feet. Every joint felt jarred loose. D block was silent. The figures in the corridor were gone. At the far end of the block, however, something moved. A single man stood in the shadows beyond the reach of the emergency lights. He looked almost ordinary, thin in old inmate denim, wet hair plastered to his forehead. Marcus recognized him from the archival intake photo. Elias Voss. The inmate smiled faintly and lifted one hand in something like mock applause. Then he turned and walked into darkness too narrow to contain a body, and vanished. They found Marcus at dawn, sitting against the wall outside D block with burns on one hand, a bruised shoulder, and a report so strange Nolan stopped taking notes halfway through. Emergency maintenance crews examined cell 14. Their conclusions were aggressively practical. Corroded lock housing had suffered catastrophic damage. Electrical equipment had shorted due to improper use near standing water. Wall stress around the back seam indicated structural failure from long-term moisture. The whole section was immediately closed for safety review. No one could explain why the interior concrete of cell 14 was warm to the touch while the surrounding block was cold. No one asked why Marcus kept Officer Reeves' badge clenched in his fist, hard enough to leave an imprint in his palm. Nolan suspended him pending evaluation. Park investigators took statements. Marcus gave them a version of the truth trimmed into shapes officials could tolerate. Water intrusion, visual confusion, a possible undocumented cavity behind the wall, equipment malfunction, personal injury. He left out the drowned officer's warning and the thing that wore Lily's voice. Elena visited him 2 days later at his apartment. She stood in the kitchen, turning Reeves' badge over between her fingers, reading the corroded nameplate in silence. "So," she said finally, "did you end it?" Marcus looked toward the hallway before answering. "I broke the lock." "That wasn't my question." He had no answer. For a while, life seemed eager to imitate normalcy. Marcus slept for 14 straight hours after his suspension. He picked Lily up the following weekend and took her to a science museum, where she spent 40 minutes inside a planetarium and later declared black holes cool but rude. He laughed, bought her ice cream, and almost believed the island had let go. Almost. The first sign it hadn't came from the news. A local article about preservation work on Alcatraz included one bland paragraph stating that D block remained temporarily inaccessible due to unexpected structural instability in a solitary cell. The attached photo showed workers standing behind a caution barrier in the corridor. Marcus zoomed in until the image pixelated. On the floor beside the barrier, just outside cell 14, was a dark, wet footprint. Bare, narrow, pointing inward. He told himself it could be anything: spill pattern, shadow, artifact of low resolution. Yet that night he dreamed of D block for the first time, not as memory but as invitation. In the dream, the prison was flooded to waist height and utterly silent. All the doors stood open except cell 14, which was shut. From behind it came patient knocking, and he knew somehow that the knocking would continue for years if necessary. When he woke, his bedroom floor was damp. He checked every pipe in the apartment. No leaks. A week later, Nolan called with an update. Cell 14's lock had been removed entirely for restoration. The door was chained open pending structural repairs. Workers reported no further incidents. Nolan sounded vindicated, as if the absence of new catastrophe confirmed his old skepticism. Marcus wanted to believe him. Then Nolan added, with forced casualness, "One odd thing, though. Camera in D block caught the chain moving around 217 3 nights in a row. Probably settling." Marcus said nothing. "Bell? Did the door shut?" Pause. No, that should have comforted him. Instead, it sounded like something trying and failing. The last uneasy thread came from Lily. One Sunday evening, while Marcus drove her back to Sacramento, she dozed in the passenger seat, then woke with a start as they crossed the Bay Bridge. "Dad? Yeah?" "There was a man in my dream." Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. "What man?" "He was all wet." She rubbed sleep from her eyes. "He was standing outside a door and he looked sad. He said thank you." Marcus could think of nothing safe to say. Probably just a weird dream. Lily stared out at the black water below the bridge. "He said not to open it again." 3 months passed before Marcus set foot on Alcatraz again. He hadn't planned to. Suspension became leave. Leave became voluntary reassignment paperwork. And he told himself that chapter of his life had closed. He found part-time work with a private warehouse firm in Oakland. The hours were dull in the best possible way. Rows of inventory, security feeds, motion sensors, human problems. Still, the island remained in his life by smaller means. His shoes were sometimes wet in the morning. The bathroom mirror would fog on dry days and reveal finger streaks where none should be. Once, while shelving groceries, he heard 3 knocks from inside the hall closet. When he opened it, nothing was there except a smell of salt and old flowers. Then, in late October, Elena called. Her voice was tight in a way Marcus had never heard before. "They reopened lower access for structural survey," she said. "Not D block, beneath it." Marcus stood very still. "And?" "The team found the old shaft." He closed his eyes. "There are new bars over it," Elena continued. "Modern ones. Welded after your incident, apparently. Nobody told preservation. Nobody told me." Her breath shook. "Marcus, there's something hanging from the center bar." He did not ask what. Some part of him already knew. "It's a key," Elena said. "An old cell key. Tag says 14. Marcus took the first authorized evening boat back to the island. Fog wrapped the bay just as it had on the night everything began. As the launch approached the dock, Alcatraz emerged in pieces. Pier first, then the slope. Then the prison perched above like a pale ruin waiting to be remembered. Marcus felt an absurd certainty that the island knew his footsteps before he made them. Elena met him near the utility entrance with 2 flashlights and a face gone paper white. "I shouldn't have called you," she said. "Yes, you should have." Together they descended through the maintenance hatch into the lower corridor. Fresh lights had been strung in places since Marcus's last visit, but they only made the shadows more deliberate. The tunnel smelled strongly of wet stone. Somewhere deeper in the dark, water dripped in slow, regular intervals. When they reached the chamber beneath D block, Marcus's stomach turned. The shaft was there exactly as before, rising toward the unseen floor of cell 14. New steel bars crossed it in a grid. Weld seams shone silver. Hanging from the center bar on a rusted ring was a single old-fashioned key with a stamped brass tag. 14. Elena whispered, "No one admits putting it there." Marcus stepped closer despite the screaming instinct to do the opposite. The water below the shaft was black and motionless. No hands, no faces, just his own reflection, except his reflection did not match. In the water, the man looking back at him wore a guard uniform soaked dark with brine. His skin was pale, his eyes were filmed white, and behind him, standing over Marcus's shoulder in the reflected world, was Officer Daniel Reeve. Marcus spun around. Nobody. When he looked back into the shaft, his own reflection had returned. Then the key began to turn slowly on its ring. Not from any breeze, not swinging. Rotating, halfway, three-quarters, until the tag faced backward and the stem pointed downward into the black water like a compass needle. The sound that followed came from above them, a metallic clack. Marcus knew it before his watch confirmed it. 2:17 a.m. Elena grabbed his arm. "We need to go!" But Marcus was staring at the shaft, because beneath the water a faint glow had appeared. Not light exactly, but pallor. Shapes were rising from below, still too deep to distinguish, but coming steadily upward in silence. The key on the ring stopped turning and dropped from the bar into Marcus's hand. He had not reached for it. It was simply there, cold and wet in his palm. The brass tag now read something different. Not 14. Bell. Marcus's breath left him. Elena saw it too. He felt her recoil beside him. The water below them trembled. A whisper rose from the shaft, soft as surf retreating over stones. "You kept it open." More voices joined it. "You broke the habit." "We learned another way." The pale shapes below drifted higher, assembling into faces just beneath the surface. Not trapped now. Waiting. Marcus understood too late. Destroying the lock had not ended the thing in cell 14. It had changed it. The old cycle, the slam, the seal, the nightly closure, had contained the breach as much as it fed it. By breaking the mechanism, Marcus had severed the ritual that pinned the hunger to one place and 1 hour. It could no longer close the same way. So it had followed the one who freed it. Not to kill him, to anchor itself. Every wet footprint, every dream, every knock in the apartment, every time Lily heard or saw what he could not. It had been learning his life, his rooms, his bloodline, the doors he loved most. He was no longer merely haunted. He was the new lock. The shaft erupted. Hands shot through the bars with terrible speed and seized Marcus's wrists, forearms, uniform sleeves. Elena screamed and yanked at him, but more hands came. Dozens, layered, desperate, crushing. Ice-cold water splashed upward in sheets. Faces broke the surface, mouths gaping, eyes white with drowning. In the center of them, all rose the shifting mass he had seen in cell 14, now less contained, threaded with human features that appeared and disappeared like bodies rolling just beneath surf. And there, within its forming face, Marcus saw his own, not a reflection, a place reserved. "Dad," it said in Lily's voice. Marcus did the only thing left to him. He shoved Elena backward with all his strength and slammed the maintenance door shut between them. The old metal door had no proper latch, only a sliding brace. Marcus dropped it into place as hands hammered the other side instantly, denning steel inward. Elena pounded from outside, shouting his name. He ignored her. There was no time. The key with his name on it had fused to his palm. Skin blistered around the metal. The voices behind him became one voice, then many, then one again. "Open, open, open." Marcus looked up the shaft toward the unseen floor of cell 14 and understood what the island wanted. A new point of closure, a living mechanism. Someone who would hear the lock at 217 no matter where he went. Someone whose fear and love and memory could carry the breach beyond the island. He thought of Lily waking from dreams about a wet man thanking her. He thought of those footprints leading toward her bag. His decision came with dreadful clarity. The chamber wall held a maintenance valve assembly connected to a disused seawater intake line, corroded but still marked in red stenciling. Elena had once mentioned that some old emergency flood systems were never fully removed. Marcus tore at the wheel with both hands until the rust gave under his weight. Somewhere in the tunnel, ancient pipes groaned awake. Behind him, the bars over the shaft began to bend. Water roared into the chamber from a side conduit, freezing and violent. The black pool surged upward, but now it was joined by the full pressure of the bay, churning the shapes below into chaos. The thing in the shaft shrieked in 100 voices as salt water hammered it back down. Marcus braced himself against the valve and kept turning until the wheel would turn no farther. The chamber filled knee-deep, then waist-deep. The maintenance door shook under impacts from both sides. Elena trying to force her way in. The drowned dead trying to force their way out. Marcus looked once more at the key burned into his palm. Then he climbed onto the shaft bars, wrapped both hands around them, and let the surging seawater pin him there. If it wanted a lock, he would give it one last closed door. The final thing Elena heard before the conduit pressure blew the lights was a single metallic sound ringing up through stone. A lock engaging. They never found Marcus Bell's body. Officially, a partial collapse in an unauthorized service area caused a flooding event, and the former security guard was presumed swept into inaccessible lower channels. The section was sealed permanently. Alcatraz released no further details. Elena kept the real ones to herself. She knew the maintenance door had not collapsed from water pressure alone. When recovery crews cut it open the next day, the steel brace had been twisted into the unmistakable shape of a key. D block was closed indefinitely after that. Cell 14 was welded shut and removed from all tours. Staff were told the closure related to structural instability and hazardous moisture intrusion. Most accepted that. Some did not, especially the new night guards, because according to 2 separate incident logs filed 6 months later, a strange thing now happens in a warehouse complex across the bay in Oakland. At 2:17 a.m., security door B on the lowest level locks itself from the inside. Cameras glitch for exactly 19 seconds. And if the overnight guard stands too close when the latch snaps shut, a man's tired voice comes through the metal and says, "Don't let it learn your name."